Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome the legendary Manny Kellough to the show. I wrote about Manny in my first book, The Joy of Cruising, in a section called Performing on the Ocean. I chose the title The Legendary Manny Kellough for his feature because in preparation for the interview, I watched a video of his ensemble performing on Royal Caribbean Symphony of the Seas, and the singer introduced the members of the band, and Manny was introduced last, emphatically as the legendary Manny Kellough. For my listeners not familiar with Manny, let me provide some context. At 17, he played drums with Ray Charles. Later, Barry White, Carmen McCrae, The Main Ingredient, Freddie Hubbard, the Rolling Stones in the Goat's Head Soup Tour, Quincy Jones on the Sanford Son Theme Song, funk rock superstar Billy Preston, where he won a Grammy and several gold records, and this one is closest to me, the funk legends Graham Central Station. Go to Apple or Spotify and listen to a song called The Jam for the I Am Manual drum solo. Cruisers might have seen him with his ensemble on Celebrity or Royal Caribbean, or as a guest musician on Virgin Voyages. The highlight of this story for me was seeing Manny playing with Larry Graham and Graham Central Station when I was 19, literally a few feet from the stage, and then getting to write about Manny over 40 years later. And now I get to speak with him in person. Manny, welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Man, it's an honor to be with you. How you doing, Dr. Paul?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I think 7-8 episodes in, I'm starting to get the hang of this podcasting thing.
That's fantastic, man.
So how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I can't be more excited with my life right now. I'm just doing wonderful, my man.
Oh, I love to hear that. So before we start talking about cruising, you have an amazing music background. And while I appreciate you being in my first cruising book, your story is worthy of its own book.
Thank you.
So I tried to capture just a little of your background in the introduction. Take us through your music career, and just keep in mind, we don't have several hours because I know you could fill up several hours.
Yeah, I mean, I started my actual playing when I was at the age of 8 years old at the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church in Los Angeles, California. I didn't even know if I could play drums or not, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. I kept sitting down and watching Deacon Avery, who was the only drummer for the church back then. And the only thing we had to play was a bass drum and a snare drum. There was no such thing as a hi-hat and a cymbal. And I used to sit down and watch him every Sunday and ask him every Sunday, could I play? I didn't even know if I could play or not. I think what happened is he might have got tired of me asking him if I could play drums. And he said, well, come on up here, young boy. Come on up here and play. So he did let me play. And then every Sunday after that, I was his fill-in drummer, whether he was there or not. I was the drummer. At the age of 13, Dr. Paul, I did my professional audition at the age of 13. And I've been playing professionally ever since. This marks my 62nd year behind the drum set.
You said at 13 you did that first audition. Who was that for?
I auditioned for a singing group by the name of the Whirlwinds, and they did music platters and Ink Spots, and they were a group like that. And they needed a drummer, so they came and talked to my mother and asked my mother if I could, be their drummer, play with them. And she took a week to consent, but she finally consented. And they told her that they would take real good care of me and wouldn't let me get into nothing wrong. And they did just that. As a matter of fact, we were playing in a place that served alcohol, which was a restaurant on one side and the club was on the other side. And on the breaks, I would have to go over to the restaurant side and sit before there was time to go back on. So the way that I got paid, they bought me apple pie and ice cream. And to this very day, that's why I love apple pie and ice cream. Well, after that, it kind of escalated. From then on, I played with various people. I played in high school. I started playing with a gentleman by the name of Hank Jacobs. And we had a group called Hank Jacobs and the TKOs. My first recording with Hank Jacobs was called The Fat Man. And this, I'm taking you now back to 1965, 66, somewhere in there. That was my very first recording. I never had set foot in the studio before I met Hank Jacobs. And I'm very blessed to say that to this very day, Hank Jacobs and I are still communicating. From there, I went on and that developed into my own group called the Rhythm Rebellion, which was like another little high school group. And we formed and started playing in a place in Los Angeles called Mavericks Flat. It was on Crenshaw, known as the Crenshaw Strip. And it was like 7 of us. It was keyboard, guitar, bass, trumpet, sax, and myself and a vocalist. And we would do a lot of cover tunes. We did all kind of stuff. We were little young cats and we were cute. We were doing everything back then. That developed. That's, as a matter of fact, at Mavericks Flat, that's one Saturday night. That's how I met Billy Preston. Billy Preston really loved our group, the Rhythm Rebellion, and he came in to see the group. As when we finished playing, Billy left. I ran out the door as fast as I could to catch him and tried to introduce myself to him and wanted to meet him officially. But let me insert and say this. Before Mavericks Flat, I used to play with Billy on Sundays at either at my church or his church. And his church was Victory Baptist Church. My church was on the other side of town, Pleasant Hill Baptist Church. And we would, if I could not get over to play with him, he would come over and play with me and vice versa. And we became very close. And then that night at Mavericks Flat is just when it was made that I was going to be his drummer. And from that on, from that night on, that Saturday night on, I was his drummer, recorded and traveled with him for 25 years plus. From being with Billy Preston, I got 4 gold singles, 2 Grammy Awards with him. I can keep going. You know.
Please do. I told you it was worthy of a book.
Speaking of the book, I do have a book out. Not out, but it's in manuscript format. It needs to be out. I just have to get someone to redo it. But I've had a very exciting career.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. What's the name of your book?
The name of my book is No Regrets. If I could, I would do it all over again. And I mean that.
Okay.
Yeah. I played with various people. I mean, I've worked with the Main Ingredient. I've worked with Carmen McCrae. I've worked with Ink Spots, the Platters, Dobie Gray. Matter of fact, I don't know if you remember the movie Down and Out in Beverly Hills with Little Richard.
Oh, sure.
I was on the soundtrack of that score. Also, there was another movie that we did called with Jim Brown, titled Slaughter. It was on 20th
I
Century.
remember that
I was
too.
on the soundtrack of that. Also, I know you don't remember this one, Sanford Son.
Of course.
I was blessed to be able to do the percussion work on that as well.
Yeah, I grew up on Sanford Son.
And it's still being played this very day.
Yep. So talk about the transition from Billy Preston to one of my all-time favorite funk groups, Graham Central Station.
Very good question. Very good. The way that came about, there was a keyboard player in the Billy Preston band. His name was Robert Sam. Everybody called him Butch.
Oh, I remember that. In fact, there was that exact line in one of the songs that I remember you most from.
He said, "My name is Robert Sam, but they call me Butch."
Yep.
and Butch was the reason that I landed the position with Larry Graham and Graham Central Station. He gave me a call, and because at this time Billy was on kind of a hiatus, he wasn't recording, he wasn't traveling or anything. So I wasn't ready to just sit down. I wanted to keep playing, and so Butch called me and said, "Hey, Deke, Larry is looking for a drummer. He needs a drummer." I said, "Come on, man, stop pulling my leg. You leave me alone." "No, man, I'm serious. Can you go up to Oakland and do the audition?" I said, "Sure." I mean, I loved it back then. I loved to drive anyway. So I jumped in my car. He came by and we met up, and we drove all the way up to Oakland, California. And from that day on, after I met Larry, we did the audition, we played, and I became a member of that group.
Now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Go ahead on.
What's the highlight of that amazing career?
The highlight, I have a couple of highlights, Dr. Paul. I'm going to say the highlight was meeting and playing for the genius himself, Mr. Ray Charles. I was fortunate to be in the Ray Charles Orchestra, and that just came by an accident. The group that I was telling you about was the Rhythm Rebellion. We used to open the shows for Ray Charles, and he carried us out to introduce us, get us exposure, and he was managing us at the time. We were in New Jersey at the Latin Casino one weekend playing there, and his drummer got sick somehow, and who else was there to play the drum chair but yours truly? That's how that came about. I was 17 years old at that time. I learned a lot from Ray Charles in about 5 minutes' time. I used to have my cymbals and everything up in the air and jump up and hit the cymbals and play drum rolls where they wasn't supposed to be. Well, I thought they were fine. But Ray Charles turned around and looked at him and said, "Wait a minute, baby. Hold on now." So immediately, I just calmed down. He said, "Wait a minute, darling." And I settled down, and he just kind of whispered at me, said, "See me in the dressing room, baby." And at the end of the night, I went to his dressing room and said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Charles, how you doing?" He said, "I'm doing fine, darling." But then I'm not doing so good, And then he told me at that point, he said, "Your name is not on the marquee, son." He said, "Nobody here to see you." He said, "But one day your name is going to be on the marquee. And when it is on the marquee, you shoot your arrow and get out the way." That's all he had to tell me. That has stood with me for the last 60 years. From that 5 minutes. By the time he changed his shirt, I grew up from being a boy to a man as a drummer, professional.
That's a wonderful story. And you sound just like Ray Charles.
I was around him enough. My other highlight, if you don't mind, I'd like to share with you and your audience.
Please do.
I was able to be the percussionist for the world famed Rolling Stones on their Goat's Head Soup tour back in 1973. And I played percussion on for them. And that's something that's hard to explain, to be in front of 50, 60,000 people every night.
Wow.
That was really that was probably the biggest highlight, other than I'm going to call being with Ray Charles, being taught and raised correctly. But as far as being on a massive stage, the biggest highlight was being with the Rolling Stones.
Now, was that due to your association with Billy Preston? Because I know he played with a lot of the UK groups. In fact, he's known as the fifth Beatle.
Exactly right. And now they're calling me the drummer that played for the fifth Beatle. But that is true. That's how that came about. Because again, Billy Preston's band, we traveled at that time, and we were opening the opening act for the Rolling Stones. We did over 60 dates in Europe.
Okay.
And Billy would play organ, and I would come out and play all the percussion instruments for the Stones.
I could ask this about every one of those artists you played with, but this artist was my favorite in my prime partying years, and that's Graham Central Station. So you talked about how that came about. What was it like touring with them?
A lot of fun. Every night was just explosive. Playing with Larry. Playing with Larry was just fantastic players. It was almost like playing with Billy. You just never knew what to expect, but it was just exciting every night. I would look forward to being on stage with Larry, because bass players and drummers lock up and play together. And that was just fun playing with Larry. Hear his beats, and he would hear what I'm playing, and we would lock up and look at each other and laugh and and just have a lot of fun every night.
Well, speaking of bass players, let's shift gears and talk about cruising.
Okay.
So 5 years ago, when I was writing The Joy of Cruising, my cousin Reg, who, as you know, is a pretty badass bass player in his own right.
Yes, he is.
In DC, and he told me about this drummer in DC who he plays with from time to time, but that this drummer plays on cruise ships, and then he told me about this drummer's background, and I said, "Damn, you got to get me in touch with this guy," and so he did, and at the time you were appearing with your ensemble on Jazz on 4 on Symphony of the Seas.
I remember that. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, actually, I hate to always be saying I am, but to share that with you, I'm the actually one that really started that jazz program there at for either Celebrity and Royal Caribbean. I started the jazz in that room, set up the program, and to this very day, those rooms still exist, Jazz on 4. And I was very happy and very proud to say that I was proud of that. I went on there with just a trio and a vocalist, and sometimes it ended up to be a quartet. Sometimes it ended up to be a quintet, just depending on what they wanted. Sometimes we played in the showroom. I remember one night we played in the main showroom at midnight, and we had almost, I guess it was about half of the theater was full of jazz lovers. And to this very day, I'm still doing jazz for Royal Caribbean.
I understand you also did some guest stints on some other lines. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just completed being a guest artist with a blues player on Virgin Voyages. His name was Slam Allen, a guitar
Mm-hmm.
player, and he called me guest legendary drummer. I played. I did 2 contracts with him, and it was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Mm-hmm. You know, talk about Virgin Voyages. I'm intrigued by that line. When they first came out, I wasn't really feeling it because they didn't do buffets, and buffets is kind of the entry drug that got me into cruising, and they also don't have children.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time when I cruise with my granddaughter. How do you find Virgin?
I really enjoyed being on Virgin, and that is a true fact. There are no kids. There are there's no buffet, and another thing is no main dining room. So there are maybe 6 to 7 restaurants that you can take a pick from
Mm-hmm.
that takes the place of, I would say, we're used to saying the main dining room. You don't have, there's no dress code or nothing. You go in your shorts, wear whatever you want to wear. As well, uh, I searched high and low and I didn't see any kids any place. You know, uh, up in the, which is on deck 15, they call it the galley. That actually takes a place of where the buffet would be. And it's really a sit down dining where not, but you
Mm-hmm.
sit down and order like if you were in a diner or something. And, it's like fast food. You can get hamburgers, you can get nice fresh salads, you can get all the sweets you want, you can get your melons and everything. And you just sit down at the table and a wait staff would come over, take your order, and they'd bring it to your table.
Mm-hmm.
It's really different.
So do you think you'll do any more on Virgin? I guess it kind of depends on their needs.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to taking my jazz group out. They have a couple of new ships coming out, and I'm looking to do some jazz, blues and jazz on there in the very near future.
Mm-hmm. Manny, what are you currently working on?
Right now, I have a couple of shows that I'm working on music wise. I'm thinking about doing another CD. Just trying to think of what I want to do. I got a blues CD in mind, and also I got a Christmas CD in mind, and just another jazz CD entitled Quarter Note Swings. So I'm working on several different things right now, as well as live performances. I have a live performance coming up April. I have one coming up June. Uh, Probably about 4 more coming up, and I end the year uh, December 3rd with a Christmas jazz performance in Columbia, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of blues, you might want to get in touch with Reds. He's currently traveling the country with Jose Ramirez, who's a dynamic blues guitarist.
Okay.
Um, so, how can we follow you on the internet and social media?
I'm I should say I'm all over Facebook. That's probably the only one that you can catch up with me on. Facebook, I have my website, which is mannykellogg.net. My schedule's on there as well as my credits, my history, gold records, all the photos are there. Those are ways that you can kind of keep up with me.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. I recall from our interviews for The Joy of Cruising that you and your wife like to cruise. You have anything booked?
Yes, we do. Matter of fact, it's another good question. I'm glad you asked. We're going to be cruising on Royal Caribbean's Grandeur of the Seas, and that's going to be December 6th, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And we're going to be going to Aruba, Curacao, Panama City, Colombia, uh, think there's another one. I think it's about 5 or 6 different islands we're going to be hitting.
I'm surprised you don't have an Alaska cruise lined up. I recall when I spoke to you 5 years ago. I mean, you had been to Alaska so many times. You loved Alaska.
I still love Alaska. I sure do. It's just no matter how many times I cruise Alaska, it's still always breathtaking. And it's just amazing to be up there to see. It's just beautiful. I don't know how to other way to explain that. It's just beautiful. See God's country.
I know that when I interviewed you, as I often do when I'm interviewing passionate cruisers, I added Alaska to my bucket list, and I'm finally going to be able to check it off because maybe a few weeks after this airs, we're going to our first Alaska cruise. So you started it, and then in the most recent book, the new book, The Joy of Cruising Again, I had a couple of key interviews. One is a captain, a retired captain, and his nickname is actually, his name is Captain Boz, but his nickname is Captain Alaska. And then another person that I interviewed, she's in the book, Professor Cruz. One of the times that I interviewed her, she had just gotten back from an amazing cruise that actually goes from Hawaii to Alaska. And that kind of settled it. So you started it and they finished it. So I booked it.
That should be a beautiful cruise because I think you're going to go all the way up the coast. You'll probably stop in San Francisco, Seattle. That's going to be beautiful.
It actually leaves from Honolulu and it does the Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, okay.
And then 6 sea days up to Alaska. And then it stops in several places in Alaska. So
so you're not stopping along the coast any place?
No. But it's a dream cruise. I can't wait.
You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
So what's on your bucket list?
I really don't have anything on the bucket list right now, Dr. Paul. I guess I just take one day at a time, and whatever comes the next day is the bucket.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So, Manny, before we let you go, I want to shift gears once again and ask a couple of fun cruise questions, and then perhaps an oddball question doesn't really have anything to do with cruising. So the first question, this is a standard question, but I always get some good ideas. What's your favorite cruise drink and favorite cruise dish or cruise food?
My favorite drink on board the cruise ship is the mango daiquiri with 3 shots of dark rum. My favorite food is ribeye steak on Royal Caribbean from Chops.
Yes. My first cruise back after the lockdown was on Symphony of the Seas. I miss you. I first thing I did when I got on was go up to the Jazz on 4 to see if by any chance you were on there, but you were off on that cruise. But we went to Chops and had a ribeye and they do a mean key lime pie. But this is about you, so.
Yes, they do. Woo! I love that key lime pie.
Let's see. The next cruise question is, what's your most memorable or funny or even most embarrassing cruise or port story?
Well, now you're taking me back to Princess Cruise Lines. I was working with another gentleman by the name of Brad. And he was the piano player and the bass player and myself. And the bass player and myself, we got off in, must have been Mazatlan. And so we wanted to get, I guess, some margarita or something like that. So we sat down and had these margaritas. The margaritas was about as big as my head. And by the time we stood up, we both stood up and stood in one place for probably about 3 or 4 minutes trying to figure out which way to go. And when we were going down the street trying to figure out how to get back to the ship, and we heard the horn blowing, and we said, "Oh Lord, we're gonna miss the ship." And now you got to picture these two drunk cats running down the street of Mazatlan trying to find this big old ship. And this was probably the most embarrassing time I've ever had in my cruise history, trying to get back to the ship and be in one shape and try to play that night.
But you made it.
But we made it. Somehow we made it. By the grace of God, we made it.
So here's the oddball question. I know that you have a following. Welcome to the many Manny Kellough fans listening. Share one thing that my listeners and your fans don't know about Manny.
Well, I don't think that people know that I am a certified chef. That was my other major in school. And I also like photography. I guess one of my favorite dishes to do, I have what is called a Hawaiian chicken. And that's probably my signature dish. I do it with ketchup, sherry, and currant jelly. And it's very simple and very tasty. So I know most people don't know that I'm a certified chef.
Well, Manny, I have a feeling that one of these days, maybe when I come to DC, the Reds house, which I have before, we're gonna hook up in person, and maybe I'll get to sample some
Absolutely.
of that Hawaiian chicken.
Let me know so I can, because currant jelly is kind of difficult to find these days, so I'd have to kind of do some research to get it, or a good substitute. But I don't like using substitutes. I like to use the real deal. But yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. Even better, I told you I'm intrigued about Virgin Voyages. So, keep me apprised as to when you might be on there again, and I'm maybe I could squeeze in a cruise
sure
at that
will,
time.
My man. I'd be glad to do that and let you know exactly when I'm gonna be on there. Because I usually get about an advance notice when they want me to be out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Finally, Manny, before we let you go, please announce this week's winner of a copy of either The Joy of Cruising or Cruising Interrupted.
The winner for this week is Ayana K. Howard. Ayana K. Howard. All right, Ayana. Congratulations to you.
Ayana is, I hope I'm saying her name right. Ayana is a member of the Joy of Cruising podcast Facebook group. And so I will catch up to her shortly after this airs.
Very good, Dr. Paul. It's always a pleasure to be able to, I'm going to say, sit in your living room and have a conversation. And we can't be strangers now, because if anybody, you know how to find me, know how to how to run me down. So we definitely have to stay in contact. And
Manny, I feel fortunate to have met you. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I saw you over 40 years ago in Columbus, Georgia. I can't remember. Probably, I think it was called Columbus Civic Center. And it was at a time when I was really into concerts, and I would always get, up front. And I saw Graham Central Station, and I still remember, The Jam is one of my all-time favorite songs. And in fact, when in promoting this on Facebook, I told people, go to Apple Music or go to Spotify, whatever, and listen to The Jam and listen to the I Am Manuel's drum solo.
Whoa, Sorikai. I am Manuel. They call me the weekend. I am one of you, but I'd like to make you one of us. All you have to do is just listen to my drums. Then you will know why they call me Manuel.
You sound exactly like you did 42, 43, 44 years ago.
Yeah. 1974.
Well, Manny, this has been a pleasure, and you're going to be cruising, for quite some time, and I'm sure you're going to have some additional stories to share. So I would love to have you back sometime.
It would be my honor, and I thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show, Dr. Paul, and I look forward to the next time, my friend.
All right, Manny. Thank you so much. All the best to you.
Thank you very much, and God bless you too. Say hello to the wife.
All right, you do the same. And as they say, I'll see you on the ocean.
All right, Doc. God bless. Bye-bye.
Oh, my goodness, that was great. Any of you who have read my cruising books or even my memoir before that know how I feel about music and talking to a legend like Manny. If you could see me right now, there's just a glow on my face. I also want to take just a few minutes to recognize 3 passionate cruisers, listeners, who have taken the time to provide me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. The first is Miss Keena Bean, and she said, I have enjoyed listening to this podcast. The stories of the guests are super engaging, and it gives you a peek into what it's like to cruise. There are so many different types of cruises and so many fun stories shared by Paul and his guests. I look forward to hearing more. I'm definitely saving this podcast in my library for easy listening. The next one is by Professor Cruz. She says, the next best thing to cruising. If I can't be on a cruise, listening to the stories of other passionate cruisers is the next best thing. These interviews are fascinating and entertaining, and it's wonderful to hear from others who share my love of cruising. Paul is an excellent and engaging host. I recommend this podcast to anyone who enjoys cruising or is curious about cruising. And the next one is from Brian Flock. I have read Paul's first 2 books and am eagerly awaiting his next installment. I can't wait to hear from all the great cruisers who are featured in Paul's books. Paul is such a talented storyteller, so we're really looking forward to hearing those stories come to life. And last, but definitely not least, I want to recognize Bonnie Bergstein. On my podcast website, there is a link to support me on a monthly basis. It starts at $3 a month. You can cancel at any time. And it's just, for support of this appreciative new podcaster. I promise continuous improvement as a podcaster, and your generous support will help get me there. And Bonnie is a new supporter. So thank you very much, Bonnie Bergstein. Until next week, I'll see you on the ocean.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted can be ordered at the link on the joyofcruisingpodcast.com, each for $16.99 plus shipping. Order the soon to be released The Joy of Cruising again, also at thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com for $18.99. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. Again, the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast. Enter to win a copy of The Joy of Cruising or Cruising Interrupted while supplies last at thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group, or both, to increase your chance to win. A winner will be announced on each show. Please leave us a review and tell a friend about us. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed the brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.